Welcome to the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast. News, interviews, and writing tips for people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them achieve it. Your host is the nationally best-selling author of more than 50 books, William Bernhardt.
Hello, Red Sneaker Writers. Lace up those red running shoes because we've got a terrific episode for you. These are happy days for the book world. Well, I mean, this is a happy day for everybody, isn't it? If nothing else, you should be celebrating the fact that today is April 15th, and nonetheless, you did not have to file your taxes today. Just enjoy your stimulus check and worry about taxes later. As usual, I'm joined by my sound engineer, Jesse Ulrich. Jesse, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I actually did pay my taxes yesterday just because.
Just because?
I had the money, and I was going to spend it if I didn't give it to the government as I owed them. So I figured I might as well do that now.
I'm sure they appreciate the early money.
They do.
Now, am I right? You've got both vaccination shots now, right?
Yes.
You are.
I think today's Thursday. Yeah. So I'm now officially past my 2 weeks of my second shot. So I am.
Well, I feel safer just talking to you. And we're what, 100 miles away?
Yeah, it feels great. So
it does. My interview guest for this episode is Jacquelyn Mitchard, the New York Times bestselling author of many beautiful books, including, of course, The Deep End of the Ocean, which, among other claims to fame, was the first ever choice of Oprah's book club. It's got a more recent sequel, No Time to Wave Goodbye. Her most recent book is Two If by Sea, and she's written many, many others. Two If by Sea, Kirkus Reviews described it, saying, a troubled protagonist is beset by magic. Isn't that wonderful? She's also written young adult work, and she is a renowned writing instructor, and I can't wait to get her on and pump her for information about writing and how she writes. But first, the news.
I have a surprise for you, Bill. Here's
yeah?
the surprise.
Okay, now that was cool.
I thought you liked that.
I feel like I'm on Dateline or something. Wow. All right, first news story. This just broke Tuesday, just a couple days ago as we're recording this. Amazon has announced the launch of something called Kindle Vella. That's Vella, which is going to be a new online Amazon platform for serialized storytelling. Now, those of you like me with long memories might be thinking, hey, hasn't Amazon tried this before? And indeed they have, and it didn't really fly, but they're giving it another shot with, I think, some new wrinkles. Basically, this new Vella platform looks to me like it's going to be a mashup of Wattpad and KDP, Kindle Direct Press, what they're already doing with self-published authors. So the idea is that you can self-publish your work, but in installments, and get paid by readers. This is going to launch in about 3 months. It's initially limited to the US market and probably designed for people reading on mobile devices like their phones. So you may be wondering, Red Sneaker Writers, I hope you're wondering, well, that sounds like it might be fun, but how exactly do authors get paid? And the answer to that is, it is not entirely clear yet. But here's what we know for sure. The idea is that readers can read the first 3 installments for free, and then after that, they have to start paying. How do they pay? With tokens, not money, tokens, although I'm sure you use money to buy the tokens. It's like Dave & Buster's. You just get tokens. And how many tokens do you need to read the rest of it? Apparently, that's going to be based on word count. Amazon has said that authors will get 50% of what readers spend on tokens on their work. But beyond that, it's all a little bit vague. You can see the graphic Jesse has put up on the screen. You see the book and the description and all of the tokens. Click here to buy tokens, and you get so many more words. It's all a little sketchy. I don't mean that in the sense of it doesn't sound right. We just don't have all the details yet. And you're not going to hear me recommending it. until we do have all the details, but I wanted to make you aware of it. Some of you may be thinking, well, could this be an opportunity for new writers, aspiring writers, people trying to build an audience to start getting their work out and capturing an audience at a relatively low price or token amount, as the case might be? Maybe so, but having read what Amazon has put out about Vella, my impression is more that they're going after established writers, like people who have an audience but wouldn't go near Wattpad or Tapas because they think it appeals to a younger audience or because they actually want to get paid for their work. I think they're looking for people with a more established authorship, maybe, or readership, people who are already self-publishing on KDP, or maybe people who have deals with traditional publishing but want some kind of side project and see if this might be a way to build more readers through serialized storytelling. I mean, it sounds fun, but whether it's really viable or not, I think remains to be seen. I don't know, Jesse, what do you think? Would you read a book in installments like this?
I mean, I would. I like the idea of like returning back to the time when authors were paid by the word and would release their stories in chapters in like the paper. My question is, like, am I getting the book early by doing this? And
I think the answer to that is yes. After you've done the serialized version, you can publish it as a novel, although Amazon is saying that once you decide you want to publish it as a novel, you've got to take it off Vella. It can't be in two places. It's one or the other. But you're right. I mean, this is a return to the old days in more ways than one. In the 19th century, of course, most novels by Dickens and Collins and the big names were published first in magazines. And it's even into the 20th century, pulp writers, Edgar Rice Burroughs, always wanted magazine serialization to build interest before they published books. So maybe this will turn out to be something interesting. We'll wait and see. All right, story number 2. This is one that actually has been out for a while, but I didn't want to talk about it until I knew it was actually going to happen, and now it appears it is. HarperCollins is buying Houghton Mifflin, but just the trade division. That is the division that deals with books like you would see in the bookstore, things for a general audience. They're retaining their educational market, textbooks and whatnot, which apparently is the most profitable part of the company, but releasing basically their backlist. And they have a pretty darn good backlist with titles like, I don't know, The Lord of the Rings. You might have heard of that one. HarperCollins, of course, is owned by News Corp, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch and his family. So the same people who control Fox News will now be controlling Houghton Mifflin. Now, Houghton is not considered one of the so-called Big Five, which, as you know, if you listen to the podcast regularly, is about to become the Big Four. But it is nonetheless a significant company, and this is a major purchase. So once again, we're seeing the consolidation of the big boys, the big publishers, the so-called, euphemistically called New York publishers are shrinking as they all consolidate, I think, trying to gain enough market share that they can compete with that very well-known online bookseller whose name begins with an A. Okay, third news story. This is on social media. Last time you recall, we talked about TikTok and how, against all odds, TikTok has become a major force in book promotion. People on hashtag book talk giving book reviews that apparently really sell books. Now Barnes & Noble is dedicating entire floor displays, for books that have been recommended on TikTok. I was on the board of ITW, International Thriller Writers, a while back, and ITW commissioned a study to look into social media, which platform is the best for promoting books. And the question was Facebook by far. But some time has passed now, and the social media world may be changing. If you can see the chart that Jesse has put up on the screen, you'll see that there is one social media platform which has more Americans participating than any other, and it's not Facebook, it's YouTube, the video-based platform. Apparently, according to this bit of research from Pew Research, 81% of all Americans go to YouTube at least occasionally, whereas a mere 69%, that's more than 2/3 of the population, go to Facebook. Now, I think Facebook may still be more valuable when you want to be able to talk about your book with a few more words than you're allowed on, say, Twitter, which has a puny, 21%, I think. But YouTube can apparently really capture a broader market. Of course, that means you have to have some kind of video platform, like, say, this live stream video podcast we're doing right now, or the book trailers that my son Ralph and many others make as a way of drawing attention to their books. Jesse, you are, I think, somewhat younger than me. What social media do you use most?
So I use Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Reddit. If I had to list them, I wouldn't count YouTube as I would count YouTube in a separate category, because YouTube is yes, you can engage with people, but it's much more passive than sort of the Facebook or Twitter engagement.
Well, people don't chat back and forth, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you want to waste some time, read the YouTube comments on a video you're watching. It's a terrible idea.
Except if you're commenting on our podcast. Yes, that's great. But right. Okay, a harder question. Has YouTube ever inspired you to buy anything?
No.
Okay. Well, at any rate, keep this in mind when you're deciding where you're going to go to market your books, because the social media world appears to be changing. 3 quick cuts, and then I'm going to bring on our interview guest. First, Clubhouse. Remember that audio chat platform I talked about on the last podcast? Now they're allowing app users to send payments directly to creators. So apparently, not only can you talk about books, people can just send you money, like it's Venmo or something. Second, Pro Writing Aid, which is an online engine for editing your work, is hosting Crime Writers Week, and that's next week. It's online, it's free, and they have a terrific lineup of guests who are going to be speaking, authors like Karen Slaughter, Lisa Gardner, Steve Berry, who was on this podcast just a few weeks ago. If you're interested in crime writing, then I don't think you could possibly do wrong by checking out this free online seminar. Last story. There's a new social recommendation app out there, and it's called Likewise, Likwise. It's a way of recommending things you like that gives stories, things like movies, TVs, and of course, books. Why am I mentioning this Yelp for story addicts? I don't know if it's going to take off, but I know this. Right now, you can register and reserve your name. And that's what you need to do, Red Sneaker Writers. Go on and reserve at William_Bernhardt or whatever your name is. Don't make the mistake many people made when websites were just taking off and they didn't reserve the URL, and pretty soon to get their own name.com, they had to pay thousands of dollars to somebody who had reserved the name first. Go on Likewise and do that right now. I wonder if Jacquelyn Mitchard has gone on Likewise and reserved her name yet. I'm thinking maybe she's too cool for that. But Jesse, why don't we bring her on and we'll ask her, all right? Hey, Jackie, how you doing?
Hi, Bill.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm not at all cool. But
all right, so no Likewise?
Really cool. I'm going to do that. Sounds like fun.
Which social media, if any, do you engage in regularly?
All of them.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I learned the hard way that no author should disdain social media.
Right.
That you should really be, you should really be bringing stories that have nothing to do with you to your readership, on Twitter, bringing stories to Facebook and Instagram and some of those other ones that younger people use, photos when you're on a book tour and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
My colleagues, lots of my friends said, "Oh, I wouldn't do that for money." And actually, that's absolutely what you do it for, is for
Hmm.
money, because that's where people find your books.
Now, I
Lots of
heard you say, like just about 10 minutes before we started the podcast, that you're somewhat on the shy side. In fact, you said that you considered me gregarious, and I thought, if I'm gregarious, you're like a recluse or something by comparison. So, do
I'm
you
not
enjoy
shy.
social?
I'm just reclusive. I
Ah,
I don't know what to do around people. I'm a writer. That's what I do. I
hmm
tell I'm a clerk typist for society. I'm not engaged in it overtly. I just
hmm
take notes.
Well, that being the case,
Whereas you, Bill Bernhardt, I expect someday to tune in and see this is Bill Bernhardt and his tigers. I mean, you do everything. I mean, there is nothing that now it's Bill Bernhardt and the news. It's you boggle the imagination, and you have 30 children, and it's amazing to me.
those tiger zoos are pretty popular in Oklahoma, but that's a whole
Yes,
different
yes, I
subject.
know what I'm talking about.
Okay, so if you're reclusive, then I've got to ask. I mentioned at the intro, you're probably at this point tired of hearing about the fact that you were the first ever selection of the Oprah Book Club. Now,
If
what
I
was
ever
that?
get tired of that,
Yeah,
if I ever disdain to talk about that, I'll slap my own face, because that
yeah,
was such a great masterstroke of generosity and good luck in my life. It
sure.
set me on a trajectory toward being able to write more stories and having permission to do that. And it was a ton of fun. And there
Mm.
was no downside.
But you were on the show, right? That's got to be hard for reclusive Jackie,
I
national
overcame that.
television.
I
You
overcame
what?
and I overcame that. And also the
Uh,
hair and makeup people.
mhm.
There is no one like Oprah Winfrey's hair and makeup people. You are
Really?
transformed into the vision that you want to see of yourself. Your hair is like it is right. Well, probably not you, but me. Um, right before you go to bed at night, your hair is finally exactly the way you want it, so you can get into bed and just read. But I've actually been on Oprah Winfrey shows probably 4 times in
Wow.
different contexts, and
Mhm.
every time was great fun.
Wow, you're right. I've never been on Oprah, but I was on Jeopardy, and their makeup people basically took one look at me and said, "Nah, there's nothing we can do. Just
You
go."
were on Jeopardy! Yeah, I
I was.
forgot about that. See what I mean? Bill Bernhardt and his tigers.
Of course, Oprah was not the beginning nor the end for Deep Into the Ocean. It was also made into a major film, which is a lot of writers. Well, after the dream of being on an Oprah Book Club selection, the next dream is to see a film made from one of their books. What was that like?
Oh, that was also a delight. Everybody
Yeah.
was just they were very the movie was very faithful to the book. The production was really classy. Michelle Pfeiffer was a doll, and really sweet and kind and generous to me. And I actually have had 2 of my books made into movies, one of which will never probably be released in the United States because of a vendor dispute. You know what a vendor dispute
Really?
is.
I
Yeah,
could
because
guess. I'm
one of
not
the vendors
sure.
is in some kind of litigation. And those kinds of things, there are bodies, I've learned, there are bodies all over the runway of films that, will never see the light of day because of litigation that has nothing to do with the film or the book.
Which was the book that was adapted, but I haven't seen it.
Um, it called Still Summer. It's about women who are 4 friends who are on a yacht trip and run into the worst kind of trouble that you can run into in the Bahamas, which is pirates.
That sounds bad.
There's nothing good about it. There are nope, it was not Jack Sparrow. There was no upside.
Outside of Disney, no good
Nope.
pirates.
Right. Some good parrots, but no good pirates.
Right, absolutely. Wow, so that's been seen overseas, but not in America.
It's not even been seen overseas yet, but will be soon.
Oh, okay.
So maybe I'll be able to get the Thai edition or something like that. Anyway,
but never on Netflix, huh?
Nope.
How many?
What? Go ahead.
How many books now? How many novels have you written?
Counting the one that is coming out at the end of 2021, which has just been dusted, and it's done and dusted. 23 books. Not like Bill Bernhardt and his tigers, but for the likes of me.
What's the title of that book?
The one that's coming out soon?
Yeah.
It's called The Good Son. And knowing how we showbiz folk are, that's kind of ironic, this one.
Well, clearly we need to get you back on the podcast at the end of the year when that one comes out. So.
That would be fun.
Okay. Some people have accused you of writing, quote, sad stories. Do you agree with this, or what's your take on that?
Absolutely. People always say to me, "You're a funny person. Why don't you write lighthearted stories?" But to me, I believe, as Kurt Vonnegut famously said, that what you do is you take these perfectly nice people and just mess them up and have their lives be terrible and cause them every kind of problem that you can possibly cause them, and then give them only one small chance to get out. One way to save themselves. And it's a tortuous kind of way that they would be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If there's not some kind of, unless you're a comic genius, if there's not some kind of gruesome peril, I'm not even going to bother.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to write it or to read it, because I have to be rooting for the characters. I have to be afraid for the characters. I have to want to walk into the book and put matters right myself.
Right.
So those are the kind of books I like, and you're supposed to write the books you want to read, right?
That's good advice. I don't really think of your books as sad, though. There's heartbreak, but there's also uplift. I mean, I never have put one down and thought, well, that was a miserable experience.
What a downer that was. You always, to me, you always have to be able to leave a story with some kind of hope. Maybe It's not a true happy ending where, like in Shakespeare, where everybody marries someone and everyone takes off their masks and everything. But there has to be some kind of hope that things will get better. And what I tell my students all the time is that when you write a story, you have to remember that for the reader, the end of your book is the beginning of their life without your book. Right?
Right.
So they have to be able to walk away from the experience of reading your story with some kind of, some kind of subconscious idea of those characters going on in a parallel dimension, and that their lives have continued, so that you feel that somehow somewhere out there in another setting, they're safe and they're prosecuting their lives just as you've gone on from the experience of reading the book.
I want to say, because I didn't say this earlier, but I can see a lot of people are watching this stream live. If you would like to ask Jacquelyn Mitchard a question, put it in the chat box, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But until we get to that, I have a traditional first question that I didn't think to ask first, so I'll stick it in the middle here. If you had one piece of advice, just one, I know you could give a dozen, but if there were one piece of advice you were going to give a writer or an aspiring writer, somebody who wants to write, what would it be?
Have courage.
Hmm.
You need brave to be a writer. You need to never give up, and you need to be able to accept. I was watching an interview the other night with James Taylor, the great singer-songwriter.
Singer, yeah.
And he was saying, in order to be a creative artist, you have to accept hardship. You have to do the things that you don't like to do. You have to be away from your family in order to create. You have to be able to bear loneliness and deprivation. Again, students of mine say to me, I don't know how I'm going to do this because I am in 2 book clubs, and I make my own grapes or my own wine. And, I have all these things that I do. How do you find the time to write? And I say, you have to go away and be alone and give all those things up.
Right.
In order to be serious about writing, you have to be brave about giving up your comforts. So that's what I would say.
There's a lot of truth. I mean, it's not even just fun things. I can, when you're supposed to be writing, doing the laundry seems really appealing.
Very attractive. Yes.
Yeah.
Those
Much
windows
less
need to be washed.
Yeah, right. Speaking of things you do in your spare time, when I was getting ready to do this interview today and reading up on you a little bit, I found out that you and I have something else in common in addition to scribbling all the time and torturing our fictional characters. I think we both are big fans of board games. Am I right about that?
Oh, I love them. I mean, the knockoff Jeopardy is my life. It's my very life. And you remember Calvin and Hobbes, the comic strip,
got the whole collected
and how
set right over there.
the tiger would carry the blanket around all the time and try to get people to play with it. That's how I am with the Jeopardy game. I'm carrying it around and trying to get people to play with me.
Really?
But no one will play Jeopardy with me, Bill. I'm sure that
Because
no
you
one
cream
will play
them.
Jeopardy with you either. Actually, I suck at Scrabble. I am the world's worst Scrabble
That surprises me.
Horrifying. 3-letter words, me. Okay, T-E-A. Okay, got it. But I am unparalleled at general knowledge games, and as a result, I can't. I have to go to other time zones and other zip codes to find suckers to play with.
So I want you on my Trivial Pursuit team, is what you're saying.
You do want me on your Trivial Pursuit team. Yeah.
What is this Pocket Jeopardy? Is this like the board game version, or what?
No,
Is
it's
this
just
an
me
app?
carrying the box around.
Oh,
That's what I mean. Trying to get a game, like kind of like the Jackie Gleason or Paul Newman of board games, trying to get going from pool hall to pool hall to try to get a game.
All right, let's talk about writing for a minute. I indulged myself, so let's get back to the actual. We're at 23 books, I think you said. Where do the ideas for these come from?
Mostly the newspaper.
Yeah.
Mostly because, and you wouldn't recognize the idea from the newspaper as it finally emerges after it's been cooked and whipped through the food processor and turned into one of my stories. But the inspiration is often something I read online or I hear about, with some few exceptions. There are some books that I've written in which the story was entirely generated by something that happened in real life, and I just took it down and wrote it. But mostly things I hear about. And I am, and I'm sure you are too, I have some gifts in my life, more than writing, eavesdropping.
Now
That
that's
is my
useful.
that is my gift. I just I consider myself so gifted that I can monitor and write down the conversation, not just at the next table in the restaurant, but 2 tables away. And some of the stuff that they hear, people
Hmm.
believe that they're alone in the world. They believe that they're conversating, and that they're completely enclosed by a bubble, which is a boon to we showbiz folk who are
Or
always collecting and putting together our next story.
maybe paying more attention to the restaurant table behind you that's having a more animated conversation than the one you're sitting at, right?
Absolutely true. My dinner
Hmm.
companion is is always on the unlucky end of this. One time I was in a restaurant in New York, and I'll say this very briefly. It was a dilly. At the next table, there was this little couple, and I say little, and I mean what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Neither one of them, the man or the woman, was over 5 feet tall, and they were dressed like gorgeous, like they had just walked off a plane from Milan, and beautiful clothes. They must have had a combined age of about 165. I mean, they were 2 little old people, and you could tell that they knew each other forever. She was, telling him, how he would like his gravy on the meat and things like that. And then he said something to her, and she slammed her cutlery down on the table and leaned over and said to him, "Don't you dare say that. I have always honored your marriage."
Hmm. Wow.
Yikes, huh? They'd been
And that,
having that argument for 50 years, right?
and did that find its way into one of your books?
Oh, you betcha. Yeah.
I've found there are times when I'll be writing a scene and remember a conversation I had maybe like 10 years before that I didn't even think was all that significant at the time. And yet, for some reason, it pops into it because it's exactly the right thing for this scene. And so in it goes.
That's absolutely true. And again, as Truman Capote said, we're always eavesdropping on our friends and our family. And when his beautiful friends on Park Avenue abandoned him, he said, "I'm a writer. What did they think I
Yeah,
was doing?"
right. Good point. But probably not one that gave him much comfort.
Nah,
So
probably
you've
not.
so you've got a bunch of books and decades of writing. How do you think your writing has changed over the course of many years? That sounds several
Many years,
years.
30 years. It markedly better in the last 2 years because
Really?
yes, and here's why.
Hmm.
I used to have an agent who was one of the best agents in the business, and I adored her, and she adored me, and that was the problem. And I would finish my books, and everybody would say, "That's swell," and they would publish them. And then I got a new agent after my agent retired, and this agent has uh, has set the bar for my writing so high
Hmm.
that it has made a far, far, far better craftsman out of me than I was before. Then
Interesting.
I got a new editor at the Mira HarperCollins, which is my now publisher. She also is extraordinarily demanding. So I've had to up my game and think of strategies and have that horrible when you get your editorial letter and it's 10 pages and it's single spaced and you get into your bed and hope that God will have mercy and take you during the night so that everyone will remember your book just the way it was. And then you get up in the morning and you creep out to the kitchen and start to do what needs to be done on that revision. It's I I felt as though I would not survive this one, as though I would have bruises on me forever, like CSI or something like that. But markedly in the last couple of years better, and I'm trying to hold myself to that standard
Mm-hmm.
even in thinking of ideas, trying to make them much more focused and much more particular and have much more, when I have, I teach professional writers or beginning writers, and I say, what are you writing about? And they're, well, I'm writing about this girl who moves to New York. And then does a dragon eater? No. Okay, does she have a brain transplant? Every story has to have intricacies never dreamed of when the person first conceives of it. Don't you agree with that, Bill?
No, yeah, absolutely.
Well, you write those thriller books that are mathematical in their
Nobody's what they
moving
seem
parts.
to be.
Yeah, no. Everyone as my beloved pal Karen Slaughter says, everyone in a story has a secret. Every single person.
Mm-hmm. You and she are good friends, I think. So you
She's
can
my
pass
good
along to her that I think Karen Slaughter writes the best first chapters in the whole business. Jackie, are you still there? I've lost your image. Jessie, is she still there?
I'm great. I'm
Oh,
back.
good.
I'm back.
Okay. So what you were basically saying before was, what people on this podcast have heard me say, and people have probably heard you say it too. Every writer needs feedback, whether it's a good editor or a beta reader or somebody you listen to, somebody you actually won't just say, no, they're wrong, but will actually listen to. That's invaluable.
It is. And I have a great friend. Actually, we're writing a book together. It's called Can You Talk? A conversation in essays between two writers. And this will be published in about a year and a half. Anne Garvin is a women's fiction writer who writes hysterical books about friends who go on the road and they have a giant Great Dane in the car and they get into all kinds of mayhem and funny things. We could not be more different in terms of our personalities, except for the fact that in real life, I'm funny and lighthearted, and Anne is dark, but she writes funny things and I write dark things. When I'm to start the idea for a book, the first thing I do is tell her the story.
Right.
We talk on the phone or we Skype with each other, and I tell her the story, and I can see when her interest flags. And I can see, and then she'll say, I just didn't buy that part. I didn't think she would do that. You have to find a better reason for her to do that. And then I go back to the drawing board and I find before I ever write anything down. And if you can, I think, submit your story to that kind of scrutiny from someone you trust, you'll end up with a better story.
That's fantastic advice. Jackie, we got a question here from Karen Bullock, who I know to be a fabulous award-winning writer. And she wants to know, what type of research did you do for the deep side of the ocean?
Deep end of the ocean.
Deep end of the ocean, excuse me.
The deep end of the ocean was loosely based on a case of a kidnapping that took place when I was in college, though I didn't write about this until 10 years anyway, 10, 15 years after I was out of college. And it was a very famous kidnapping in which the child was, his name was Stephen Stainer. It's a very famous case. And he was out there in Oklahoma, I believe, and was kidnapped and then returned to his family. 7 years later, he was kidnapped by a pedophile who raised him kind of as an object of his abuse and kind of as a son. And when the guy took another little boy, a 6-year-old, that was when Stephen Stainer was 14, he walked out and he took that little boy with him. And the story could not be more tragic. I mean, he went back to his family and there was all this readjustment for him. And then he finally was making it in his life, and he was killed in a motorcycle accident when he was only 24. But I thought about what would happen if you lost your child, what would be, and then the child returned to you, but it wasn't the same person. I mean, because you never are.
Right.
After you've been
Not after that.
in a situation like that, you're not the same person. You may look the same, but I just thought it would be an interesting idea. So mainly I wrote about the psychological realities of people undergoing transformative experiences as adolescents and as children. And so that was sort of all the research I did. And then my first husband's family, I was widowed when I was in my 30s, and my first husband's family had been this big Italian family in the restaurant business, right? And so that's what the family in the Cappadoras in the deep end of the ocean were. And that was sort of a way to feel close to him after he died very young. So.
We've got another question from somebody watching. Sharon Jenkins wants to know, what do you think the future looks like for women authors?
I think, it looks better and better. I think that women authors have gotten to the point where they just are not going to take a back seat to the big sort of and I love Jim Patterson. He's a swell fella. He's a doll.
He is.
He's a doll of a guy, and he does everything for everybody in the world, but people just aren't going to take a back seat to those sort of big box, the target version of authors like Jim Patterson and things like that. They're pushing their way into the front row and are not going to be denied anymore. Or dismissed anymore. Years ago, I live on Cape Cod, and don't get any ideas. I mean, there are lower end parts of Cape Cod too. I don't live next door to the Kennedy compound, though who would want to? Oh my goodness. Anyway, so I live on Cape Cod, and one time I went to a book signing. A fellow was doing a book signing called Sebastian Junger, wrote a little book called The Perfect Storm. And he's my neighbor down the road from me. I went up there with my little sister, and I asked him to sign my book, and he said, "What do you do?" And he didn't care, but I said, "I'm a writer too." And he said, "What do you write? Romances?" And my sister sort of punched me in the back and said, "See him and raise him one." I mean, she said that to the back of my head.
You can.
And I did. And I just really think that women writers will not be categorized anymore. And here's a wonderful organization, by the way, Sharon. Tall Poppies is a organization that you can join of women writers who do an enormous amount promoting each other's novels. And there's probably 60 or 70 women writers in that group, which was founded by my friend Ann Garvin. And they do an enormous amount to get the names of women novelists out there.
Fantastic. Someone else is asking, have you declined to write a story because it might offend someone?
Not ever.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
No. My feeling is, if they did it and I know about it, oh well, I mean, the way to avoid me writing about it was not to have done it.
Right.
And I never want to write. There's an averse kind of to that question, and it's, have I ever written a story that was intended to expose or punish anyone? Not ever either. Right. I just want to write stories that tell the truth about things that I find shocking, compelling, interesting, heartbreaking, miraculous, And people say to me all the time, I can't write this story until after my great uncle dies or something like that. And and that I find that when writers say that, it's just another form of fear. Fear. I mean, we're so afraid to write anything. I mean, we're the abyss. It's the abyss. And we're so afraid to do it anyway that we'll take our fear wherever we can find it, even if it's worried that great Uncle Harold is going to be offended by this. And I say, please do not exaggerate your own importance. Great Uncle Harold will never read this book. If he does, what he's going to say is, was she stupid? Did she not know there was never a Mr. Chicken on the corner of Grand Avenue in Harlem? That's what he's going to notice, not that it was all about him and his affair with the parish priest or whatever.
Right. Jackie, we're reaching the end of this, but before we do, would you talk a little bit about Merit Press?
Oh, my beloved defunct literary young adult press was under the aegis of Simon and Schuster, and it went under a couple of years ago because of some of those consolidations that you talked about, when the amoeba, when the publishers play amoeba tag and they suck up another.
That amoeba tag.
Like that, they suck up another one. But I had a wonderful time doing that. And also believe that for you writers out there who write young adult fiction, it is where some of the most devastating, the riskiest, the most eloquent fiction that's being written is being written for teenagers right now.
That was a young adult.
Don't sell that short.
Yeah. So you think you might ever get into editing or publishing again at some point?
Right now, I'm pretty selfish. I do private editing, and I do that to shape the novels of people who come to me and want to know how they can get their stories ready for publication. And I kind of like doing things behind the scenes right now. The only thing that I really want to do that is out there is to write my own novels and promote them. I just don't have your energy, Bill.
Well, I like to write too.
Yeah.
But you can't write all 18 hours you're awake each day. So
no, I can't.
Really?
No, not every. When I go to a writer's colony or writer's residence like Yaddo or the Ragdale Foundation or something, I have very strict rules for myself. I write from probably 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. The rest of the day is just for watching reruns of Criminal Minds.
Speaking of Merit Press, where'd that name come from?
I have a little girl named that. My daughter, who's 21 and graduating college the next month. My daughter, my wonderful, beautiful, inspiring daughter, who was raised in abject poverty when she was a little girl in Ethiopia and came to the United States when she was very young, spoke no English, 5 words of English, and now is a scholar graduating from Amherst with a degree in legal studies and African American studies. She is just a shining example of the transformative power of words.
You were giving me grief a little bit earlier, but you have 9 children. Am I right about that? 9?
I know. Yes.
That's right. You can say that now. It's possible.
Yes, I can.
And still manage to write.
Yes, they are very tolerant of me. Well, they're not babies anymore. My youngest kid is 15 now, and my oldest kid is 34. And so this was a store that opened really early and did not close at a reasonable hour, let's say.
Right.
But they're very tolerant of me. They're respectful of my need to work. And as many children, you know this, in big families, children in big families tend to be independent and supportive of each other. They help each other out when they're not like on the warpath, they help each other out in some pretty material ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been a complete pleasure. I need to get
Me
you back out to
too.
the conference, to
I would
WriterCon,
love to come.
and I'll play Jeopardy with you when you come. So
Will
bring
you?
the box.
Okay. We're gonna film that, okay?
Oh,
Laura's
that
gonna
would be
film it
good.
for us, right? We're gonna
Absolutely.
have the it's gonna be like the end of the century Jeopardy off
I like
between you and
that.
me. Yep.
Jackie, thanks so much for being on the
You're very
podcast.
welcome. Thank you for having me, Bill.
You bet. I've got just a few parting words before we wrap this up. I mentioned last time that I'm doing these talks with Context Learning on various topics relating to books and literature. Next Sunday, meaning this forthcoming Sunday, I'm doing one on courtroom drama, right up my alley. And that'll be on Sunday at 2:00 Central Time. And if you're interested, please go visit contextlearning.com and you can sign up for that. I also wanted to say a word about summer writing retreats like Jackie was just talking about. I host one every summer in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, at the Writers Colony at Dairy Hollow, which is the most beautiful place on earth to write. The rooms are all designed for writers. It's just a spectacular experience. I look forward to it every year. This year, it's July 7th through 11th. It's 5 days of intensive focus on your work. I read your work every night. I edit it. We'll come back next day ready to talk about it. You'll get feedback from me and others, that kind of valuable feedback. Jackie and I were also talking about, and we'll talk about various writing topics and have a lot of fun. I'm mentioning it now because it's already half full. Of course, it's a small group retreat by design because I want to have a small enough group that I can give everyone individual attention and editing. But if that would interest you, please go visit my website, williambernhardt.com. Click on the Red Sneaker Writers link. There's a link right there that Jesse just put in the chat box. And think about coming out to the Writers Retreat this summer. Our next guest on the next episode of this Red Sneaker podcast, hold on to your hats, will be Lisa Scottolini. Legal thrillers, women's fiction, and now she has just published a beautiful work of historical fiction called Eternal. I started it 2 nights ago, and it's just fabulous. The schedule will be a little different. That'll be almost 2 weeks from today, but we're going to record that one on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central Time rather than Thursday. I'll post about it on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and any place else I can think of to post about it. I've known Lisa for many years, and I'm really looking forward to talking to her on the podcast. Until next time, Red Sneaker writers, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.